Apple shares at a record. The stock has more than doubled over the past year, in spite of the law of large numbers, and has been a major influence on the performance of market cap weighted indices like the S&P 500. But the $1.3 trillion company does not have the largest S&P weighting over the past 40 years. That distinction goes to IBM. Let's find out whether Apple can keep climbing. Joining us now, Tom Forte, senior research analyst at D.A. Davidson. Also with us is senior markets commentator Mike Santoli. Our guest host, Jason Trennert, is here as well. I just want to start with you, Mike, because doubling in the past year, it finally happened. Yep. All the bulls on Apple that waited so long, and it happened, I guess, on the AirPods. That's being simplistic, because I'm saying there was no new there's no Apple Car. Right. There's none of the things that Apple was supposed to do ever happened. It was just
but the China
more
trade stuff didn't go as
China trade didn't go badly, and I wasn't going to mention it, but he has a pretty good relationship with Washington, too, and people didn't know whether
that was their lifting of a potential negative.
That was a lifting of a negative, but the other, my question was going to be a chicken and egg question. I mean, the S&P has been unstoppable in like a kind of a scary way. It just keeps going momentum-wise, and Apple's a big part of that, and the S&P going up. The S&P going up is a big part of Apple going up, and Apple going up is a big part of the S&P going up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a very elite class or group of stocks like Apple, and Apple's the lead one in the last year, that is in an outsized way driving the S&P 500. So, yes, in the last little stretch of time, it's we want to buy stocks. Give me an obvious great one to buy. I like the flavor called Apple, and I'm going to buy it. Now, that being said, Apple also is going to have $65 billion in free cash flow this year. It's by far, and by the way, that's about what it had in fiscal 2018. So the amazing thing about it is not much has changed financially with the business versus 2 years ago. It's just more confidence by investors that this can last a long time, and it's not going to fall away. And the upgrade cycle for iPhones is no longer this suspenseful. Are people going to buy the phone? It's been smoothed out.
Let's get to Tom Forte. I just think they're genius. That everybody owns those stupid things and everybody loses them. You know what I mean? They were so losable. That's obsolescence designed right into the product. Tom Forte, don't tell me it's going to be $2.6 trillion in a year market cap.
So the advantage that Apple had in 2019 was incredibly low expectations. So they started the year with a surprise pre-announcement. And the story in 2019 was really about Apple diversifying away from the iPhone. And the story in 2020 for Apple is Apple leveraging what could be a multi-year shift in multiple years of smartphone unit growth because of 5G. So I think that while expectations are much higher for Apple shares in 2020 than they were last year, and it certainly benefited from low expectations, they're moving into their sweet spot, meaning that this looks like it could be a really good year for their smartphones after last year, where it was basically Apple's efforts to diversify away from their smartphones. So I think there is a clear path for Apple to continue to rise in 2020.
Much as our buddy Warren made on this by now.
I was wondering the same thing. Right. I think his average buy-in price at the beginning was, I shouldn't say because I got to look it up, but it was well below here.
It was a lot
lower. It's below 200.
Oh.
Yeah.
It's turning out to be
it was 180.
It went from one, remember, it was 9 times earnings.
Yeah.
Blah,
well, that's
blah,
the thing.
blah.
That's the thing. So you could say there's a path, but it's a very different story. The net cash position of Apple, it's still huge, but it's not really that material anymore to where the stock is valued at the moment. So that used to be a big part of the story.
Right. And how much, though, do you think this number is based on? You don't believe it's based on the upgrade cycle come next fall, based on this idea that 5G is going to hit us and
I think it's based.
Explosive.
I think it has to become
moment.
That has to become a little bit the thesis right now from this level. But I think it's more about, it's no longer this sense that every 2 years they have to catch lightning in a bottle with magical new phones. It's more about the market is there for it. The install base is there. There's kind of this inherent upgrade momentum. Whether that's true or not, I think that's what's in the stock. I think 5G right now, it's a total marketing push. I don't think the real world, is waiting with bated breath for something like that.
Yeah. Tom, can I ask you about the valuation? I think Joe made such a good point, which is
wait a minute.
You have just a second ago when you were saying over 50%.
Breaking news.
Yeah, 50%. Yeah, 50%
it was totally unintentional. Totally unintentional. If I did.
50% of the market is now passive, right? 85% of passive indices are market cap weighted. So it's almost impossible for the market not to go up and have the largest weights not go up. By the same token, I would ask Tom, it's what, 26 times trailing earnings. I don't know what your estimate is for the PE for this year coming up, but it's certainly not cheap. By, you know, one would say by kind of historical standards, certainly where it was when Warren Buffett was buying it. So what do you think?
Yeah, so shares are definitely expensive by historic levels, but there is an opportunity again for the stock to grow into the valuation, which you really don't say that often for Apple, on the iPhone unit sales with the 5G rollout. And the 5G rollout, let's be clear, looks like it's going to be a multiple-year event. So you may have it in major urban markets in 2020 and then in more markets in 2021. And I do think that Apple's strength, one of their strengths other than design, is marketing. And hype around 5G plays to its strengths. So I think that, yes, clearly the stock is expensive by historic valuations, but there's an opportunity for them to grow into the valuation on strength in their most important product item, being the smartphone.
Let me just go back. Buffett's purchases of this in the first quarter of 2018, they bought 75 million shares of Apple. That added to the 165.3 million shares they already owned at the end of 2017. And at that point, in May of 2018, I was out there for the annual meeting, and Buffett said, the idea that you're going to spend loads of time trying to guess how many iPhone X are going to be sold in a 3-month period totally misses the point. It's like worrying about the number of BlackBerries 10 years ago. That was what he said a year and a half ago.